I wanted to provide you with an overview of math differentiation and MTSS. As a special educator, you will have involvement in all elements within your schools. Every school does it differently, and some schools may want you to be part of the MTSS team, multi-tiered systems of support. This training was prepared by myself and Nora Robinson from ESU 13's SOAR Professional Development Department, and we presented it in October of 2018. But I thought it was really fitting because it shows a lot of research behind why students might struggle in math and what we need to do as educators to make sure that they have everything they need. While the training was on math differentiation and MTSS, many of these are strategies that special educators would use to support math to students with mild and moderate disabilities. So I want to just go through a few of the slides. I'm going to offer the PowerPoint as well for you to look at because there are some strategies, but math is right up there with snakes, public speaking, and heights. One of the things we have to make sure of is that we don't rule out the fact that a student might be having anxiety about math, that it's not always necessarily, it's that video, it's not about the nail, it's not always about the math. It's not always about the actual math problem. Sometimes it's about their feelings of self-efficacy towards doing the math problems. So we have to remember that math anxiety is a huge thing. Phobias are a huge thing that we have to acknowledge and make sure that we are going to pay attention to. So I want to talk a little bit about why we have to differentiate. So we differentiate in our classrooms every day to maximize student growth and individual success by providing many avenues for students to acquire content, process information and ideas, and to develop products. So we have to remember that differentiation is a process, and we have to support teachers in our role as a special educator on getting the materials that are needed to differentiate for our students so that they can be included in an inclusive environment. Many of our schools will have some sort of RTI or MTSS system. Multi-tiered systems of support are critical to reduce the number of qualifications in special education. I personally have experienced this firsthand. I was a K-2 interventionist, and I was able to experience 50% reduction in the number of students that came onto my caseload in second grade because I had them in an MTSS intensive tier during kindergarten. And I was able to do math supports. I used touch math, I used our Triumphs program, I used what was required of our tier 3 intensive intervention. And even though it says it's a one-on-one, I had one-on-one sessions with a small group. And so they were in my intensive tier. And by doing that, I was able to have 50% of them return back to the classroom, where if we hadn't done that, we may have had 4 of them enter our caseload. So the biggest difference between differentiation and MTSS is that differentiation includes all students, modifies lessons to meet individual needs. But MTSS adds a different component to that by increasing supports as data indicates need. So data is the biggest decision in MTSS, and I can't stress to you enough how important data is in special education. And as a teacher, you have to do your progress monitoring and keep your data so that you know what you need to do for students. So instructional intervention, and this is where we come in often as special educators. It's a planned set of procedures that are specifically designed at teaching a specific academic skill to an individual or small group. So we as special educators, that's what qualifies students for our programming, because they cannot get into special education if they don't have the fact that they need specialized instruction. Because if they need specialized instruction, that's the component that qualifies them. Differentiation is a wide variety of teaching techniques and lesson adaptations. This can all be done in the general education classroom. And part of our job as special educators is to be a collaborator and consult to those teachers, because teachers don't always have that wide set of knowledge that we as special educators might have. So this is basically Nebraska's MTSS system. They built a house. And I think it really is a model that really explains MTSS the best. I think it's better than the pyramids. I think it's better than anything. But Basically, you have a house and it has the foundation, and it's the policies and procedures that you have been given by your school board. And it's your data, your scheduling, your interventions. Those are things you do not have in your control. But what we do have in control as teachers is that core instruction. And my phrase is, you can't get in the door without the core. Because if our students are not involved in core instruction and they are retained without retention by being put in a second grade math book when they are in fourth grade, then we have failed them, and we have ensured that they will not be able to test at that grade level on any state assessment. So we have to remember that you can't get in the door without the core. So with MTSS, all students should be involved in the core. Even if we are providing interventions and have them in special education, they should be in the core, and our supplemental intervention is the roof. It is additional to the core instruction. So it's very important that we not only have them in there, but that we understand the purpose of the core math instruction so we can help teachers to support that. So the core is important because Jim Wright identified in 2013 that it isn't the math. It's not about the nail. The key limitations in students who struggle with math are as below: spatial organization, visual details, procedural errors, inability to shift that psychological set, which is moving through different types of problems. You come into that when algebra is really brought in, and graphomotor, poor handwriting. How many students have thought they had a plus sign because they just made kind of a mess on that page? And then memory, the working or long-term memory and judgment in recall with that. Many students that you will work with will know what they're doing at the top of the page, but they won't know what they're doing at the bottom of the page. That is something that is very, very common with our students that have mild and moderate disabilities. So we have to remember that these components, they may not have problems in all of them. They may only have problems in one or two of them. That's where we have to identify where the weakness is so that we can put those differentiation strategies into place. So remember that just because a student struggles in a math concept doesn't mean we should math track them. It just means that we have to be astute to know, is it executive functioning? Is it the visual spatial? What is it that they need? We have to find out what they need. We have to be proactive and embed differentiation. So it all begins in Tier 1. Every student should be in Tier 1. They should be in their core instruction. But these are the things that you can do to ensure that students have differentiation in the classroom. So how do we know what to do? This is a very interesting research project. It was a meta-analysis that identified the effect size of math implementation and instructional strategies. And when you look at that chart, anything at 0.5 or above is significant effect. So in that special education student column, you notice that visual and graphic descriptions of the problems, so using that concrete representational abstract thinking, is important. It's a 0.5. Then you have systematic and explicit instruction. This was very surprising to me. But that means that you have a scripted, systematic program, or you are doing that chaining and that task analysis, and you are doing that algorithm card, because that has a 1.19 effect size. That means we can significantly impact them. That didn't surprise me as much, only because those are the methods that I used when I was in the classroom, and I saw significant growth from students. Sometimes on the NWEA maps, we would grow anywhere from 15 to 30 points in a cycle because we were using those methods. So knowing that is really important to you as a special educator. And student think alouds. A lot of time we don't have our students talk about things. We don't give them the processing time they need. So it's really important to see that difference between what low achieving students need and what special education students need. And I think for you guys as future special educators, pay attention to that special education category. And I do recommend you look up the Hanover research from 2014. It's really good math research. So how impactful were those methods that we just talked about? When we look at what's strong, instruction during the intervention should be explicit and systematic. You're going to see that over and over again. So we have to remember, we need to give them lists. We need to chain. We need to give them the task list. That's what's going to help them, and we need to make sure it's repetitive. Intervention should provide instruction on solving word problems. So I have some strategies within this and within the document that I'm going to post that will help you with word problems. Word problems are very difficult to support, but that's where strategy instruction comes in. If you read the research on strategy instruction, that is what has the most impact for our students within math. Our moderate are, beyond screening them in Tier 1, is intervention materials should include opportunities for students to work with visual representations. That's that concrete representational abstract, and I'm going to talk about that a lot because that is what I saw having the most impact for me as a teacher. Interventions at all grades should devote about 10 minutes in session to build fluent retrieval. Unfortunately, a lot of these programs, the math core programs, do not have fluency in them. Math fluency is critical. One of my favorite for multiplication is the Touch Math program, skip counting. I'm going to talk more about that as we go through, but you can really, really impact kids using a skip counting procedure when doing multiplication. So I'm going to skip some of the portions of this, but I want to make sure you have it. I have definitions of what explicit instruction is. So make sure you understand what explicit instruction is, because that was at 1.19 effect size, and it is going to be critical as you move through your career. You might use guided math worksheets, video modeling, mnemonics. I'm going to talk a lot about that. Common underlying structures. Intervention should include instruction on solving word problems. I'm going to give you some mnemonics and graphic organizers as resources that you can use in your lesson plans, or you can use however you need them. Visual representation, that's that concrete representational abstract methods. I'm going to show you some multiple modality programs that will really help with that as well. Fact retention. This is where even just fluency, and it doesn't have to be timed, but just make sure it is a daily occurrence. So one thing that you really should understand, and if you look at the research of Doug Clements and Julie Sarama, the trajectories, there are specific skills that each student should have at different ages. And so you need to make sure that those students have them. If our students in special education are struggling in something and we see that a trajectory is being missed, then we can go backwards and make sure that that's the strategy or that's the skill that we are supporting. That is critical for students. If they are missing a basic skill, they can't go beyond that. So that's a big math component. This is really good. The video is really good, talking about how we're really trying to get them to master the skills as opposed to just moving forward. So learning trajectories of counting. Counting is a huge thing. Rote counting, one-on-one correspondence, all of those things are difficult tasks to get for students. You will see that more when you work with students with moderate and significant disabilities. You will see it with your students with mild disabilities, but one of the things that you're going to see mostly is just that memory. It's that working memory and that inability to just remember. But remember that the core is always going to be important. So even when those trajectories are in place, the core is the critical piece that we have to remember. Then we have to identify what is missing. So if spatial organization is the concern, that's where we're going to go help a general education teacher set some ways into the classroom to be able to do that. We might give her graph paper for our student to be able to do their problem. We might have guided math work where we've written most of them out for them, because if they can still do the task, that's what our purpose is. So we have to remember that we need to look at these key limitations and help support that in the classroom, because our teachers cannot have 30 students in their classroom and not have that support. And you are the specialist that is supporting the student with a mild disability. So make sure that you are supporting that teacher in the way that that student needs it. So there are a lot of other slides in here. I'm not going to go through a lot of it, but I want to show you something for the uppers, because if you're teaching high school and you look at Jim Wright's general math difficulties and you compare it to the national algebra difficulties that have been noted, it isn't really that different. Algebra difficulties include inability to translate word problems into math symbols, distinguish between relevant or irrelevant information, struggle with symbols, and basic vocabulary and operations. All of those things go into the right side. And when you bring all of that together, it is very difficult for students to complete algebraic equations. But if you look at that inability to shift psychological set, and you break it down into an algorithmic task analysis, you've taken care of the issue for the student if that's the concern. If you've got spatial organization in long division and they are not able to follow the lines, making graph paper work is going to take care of a lot of it. So sometimes it's a simple movement, sometimes it's not, but it is very helpful. If you remember any of these things from this particular PowerPoint, the Jim Wright general math difficulties are probably some of the most important skills you will take forward. Graham Fletcher has a lot of stuff out there on progressions of math. He is a great resource. If you need to use a strategy or anything, he'd be one to look up. I'm going to go through quick to kind of give you a few more strategies. How we did this presentation is a differentiation for all, so things that can be done in a whole class setting, and differentiation for a few, which is in a small group setting, and then interventions for one. So we looked at number sense, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and problem solving. So I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but the thing that I want to highlight for you is that there are games, there are activities, there are all kinds of things that you can use as your strategies as you move through your lesson plans and you write your assignments and you do your in-class portion of your program. So just remember that there are a lot of things. You'll see wiki sticks here, the link strategy, the Frayer model, self-created materials. Those are the things you can put in your lesson plans as the differentiation component. So just go ahead and look through the attached PowerPoint that I'm kind of showing you quickly because there are so many strategies in there. I'm also going to upload the sheet that had the links to the strategies for a lot of these. That way you can save that document and use it when you go forward as a teacher, because it will matter to have those resources because it will save you a lot of time. And the biggest thing that special educators often say to me is that they don't have the time to do this stuff. So doing those kind of things will really help. So I'm going to just flip through this really quick so you can get an idea of what's on here. There's the guided math sheets and the scaffolding, Vygotsky scaffolding methods. These are actual things that I have done with students and they have been incredibly helpful. And usually after the 5th or 6th problem, the students are doing the things by themselves. The TINS method is something that I used often. And then a student, it was really neat, a 5th grade student actually did so well and her classmates wondered why she had this graphic organizer, and so she taught them to do it and all of them started using it. So see, there's a lot of things that can be differentiation in the classroom that we use as special educators. So communicating and collaborating with your gen ed teachers is really important. That's the TINS strategy, and there's a link to the program. You don't necessarily have to have the programs to be able to do this stuff, but if you do have to do a problem-solving lesson, this is a great strategy to use. This is the chart that I would just do with my students. There's more examples of some graphic organizers. Understood.org has a lot of great resources. So there's just a lot of different things. And if students aren't making significant progress in that MTSS system, that's when we usually come in because we are specialists that know how to do interventions. So we'll usually be called up. So that is basically what I wanted to present to you today. I just want you to remember that it is really important that you look at these strategies, and I would save the page that I'm going to upload as well, because that will just be a wealth of resources for you. Whether you use it in this class or not, it's going to be something that you will have as kind of a start to your classroom. And everything on there, I believe, is free. There's samples of some of the programs, but almost everything is free. So if you have any questions about anything that I said, I know I moved through that quick, but I wanted to respect your time. So if you have any questions, just let me know, and I will answer them as soon as possible. Thank you.